Why is everything in capital except progression?
So this starts our video. What we're going to be talking about today is how we program strength progressions. There's a couple like vague videos we've put out on it, talking like loosely how we do it. This is going to get more into the specifics for the 2025 training season. So I'll also write this up here: 2025 CrossFit Games training season. To start, and what we've already talked about in other videos, is that we program around the open, not because we care that everyone participates in the open, although we do recommend it. We love the open. We think it's an amazing community event where it brings out the best in people. It brings out the most intensity. It brings out, that special feeling and that special attitude, effort, ability in workouts to do something you've never done before. It's where people get their first muscle up. They PR their lift. They do this. They do that. It's awesome. We love it. But more importantly, aside from participation, in terms of actually signing up, more importantly, it's how we measure our increase or decrease in fitness. The reason that's important is it's not a standardized set of workouts every year. If it were, we would just do the same exact things week to week to week to week. Run, bench, squat only, because those are the three things we test. Because the open is different every year and it's the unknown unknowable, we have to train work capacity across broad, time, and middle domains, so that when the open shows up, assuming it's a good test, we see if we improved our work capacity across broad, time, and middle domains or not. So that's why we program around the open and we use the CrossFit Games season. We use it as our benchmark standardized test of fitness. If we get better in the open, we can reasonably assume we've gotten fitter. If we do way worse in the open, and there are exceptions to this, but generally speaking, if you do way worse in the open, you have not gotten fitter, you've gotten less fit. The exceptions are, okay, one year your arch nemesis weakness shows up in the open and the previous year it hadn't, and that hurts you on the leaderboard for this reason or that. But even then, you can still look at other scores and other workouts and say, hey, I've done way better on stuff like this, I'm fitter. All right, so with that being said, when we write out a year's worth of strength progressions, we use that with the 2025 season in mind. So when we're at C1, this just means cycle 1. Let me backtrack a little bit. Just so you know, each of these is 4 weeks, and in the middle is a 1 week back off. And that just means during this 1 week period, there's no structured strength progressions. You're still lifting a little bit, and we actually recommend the compete track to, hey, rest as much as needed to recharge before we start the next cycle. But we don't program a true deload, because if someone just starts up on this week, or say this is their second week on the program, we don't want to give them nothing. We want them to have plenty of training to keep them increasing their fitness. But we always write a notes section at the beginning of, hey, this is back off week. If you're tired, you're beat up, you're sore, rest as much as needed. 1 workout a day, whatever. So cycles are 4 weeks long. There's a 1 week back off in between. So 4 week window, 1 week back off, 4 week window, 1 week back off, 4 week window, etc. This first cycle started right after semifinals. Prior to this cycle, like right after quarterfinals, 60 track went through a cycle, but not to compete. So after quarterfinals finished, 60 started their first cycle of the year. It was essentially very similar to this, but it was really varied. So we're not going to include it here because it's not a part of both 60 and compete. The rest of this is, but you can also note that if you follow 60 track, you will have done 8 cycles following the 2024 CrossFit quarterfinals, open, etc. If you're following compete, you would have done 7. So cycle 1 this is now, we'll get into kind of the theme, the progression of the entire cycles, and then we'll get more specific and more specific. So from 1 through 7, we're trying to build an athlete to be best prepared for the open or quarterfinals or semifinals or the games. So we start at the base of the pyramid for all intents and purposes of strength, and we're building up and up and up and up. So this is not, we don't want you to think about this pyramid as the fitness pyramid, but think of this as a strength pyramid. And there would be things like structural integrity, and then there would be something like hypertrophy, and then there would be technique, and then there would be getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And so that's what we've done with these cycles. And so the first cycle, the general theme is structural integrity. And so what that looks like is on day one, there were front squats and 30-second front squat holds, getting very comfortable in end ranges of motion, building up the ligaments and tendons and joint structures, musculature, etc. A lot of strict gymnastics work, a lot of unilateral work with dumbbells and kettlebells, a lot of posterior chain work, etc. The next cycle, we've taken some of the structural integrity that we've tried to develop over 4 weeks, and we build on top of that by saying, hey, this cycle is going to be focused on trying to put on muscle mass and hypertrophy. So we've got some high volume back squats. We've got a deadlift and a sled superset. We've got a pressing complex. We've got still some Olympic weightlifting, but with a lot of squatting here. And then we've got a bench and strict pull-up hypertrophy session on Saturdays. From there, okay, we've built some structural integrity. We've put on some muscle mass, or at the very least developed muscular stamina. Now we can really work on technique and skills with some of this stuff. So now we've got a clean technique session finished with a really dense period of front squats. Then we've got some gymnastic skills, which changed each week. Then we've got deadlifts with these challenging variations such as like deficits, pauses, etc. Then we've got a mirrored snatch technique and dense overhead squat session that basically these are the exact same complexes finished with squatting. And then Saturday's odd object stuff. So we've got structural integrity, then we've built some muscle mass, then we've worked technique a lot. Now we're really prepared, if you've been following along consistently, to start to go heavy. So this is the first heavy cycle. We call it heavy 1. And on day 1, there was a deadlift strict press superset. Day 2, front and back squat clusters. Day 3, jerk complexes. Day 4, hang squat snatches and hang squat cleans. And day 5 was another skill development day where we had a gymnastic skill that was different each week. Now, we're just finishing that up. Next week is the 4th week of cycle 4. They'll have another back off here, and 60 actually will have the retest of their benchmark week. And I believe benchmark week for 60 was May 20th, the first time around. So they did benchmark week May 20th. Now it's going to be like September 3rd. So they've had 3.5 months to train and focus on fitness and say, hey, let's see how we've improved. So benchmark week is there. Then we're going to be on cycle 5, which is heavy 2. So second heavy cycle. So here we've got clean and jerk waves. We've got weighted dips, weighted pull-ups. We've got heavy overhead squats, a heavy lunge variation, different variation each week. And then we've got a power snatch and snatch deadlift day. So we're starting to get heavy. Like in this cycle, it was a lot of the basic lifts, like the power lifts, for example, deadlift, strict press, front squat, back squat, etc. This cycle, we'll get into more Olympic lifting heavy. So we've got clean and jerk waves and snatch complexes, overhead squats, etc. Then cycle 6, we're going to focus more on complexes to get comfortable with heavier weights for higher reps and to continue to work technique. So it's a little bit of a back off from super heavy. You've gone heavy, heavy, slight back off from heavy, but now working a little more volume, a little more complexity as you've built a strength. Snatch complexes Monday, bench and back squat Tuesday, Wednesday, push presses Friday, and then a clean complex on Saturday. And then cycle 7, which is the last cycle the last structured 4-week cycle before we enter open prep, will be like a testing cycle. And the whole premise or the whole idea of this cycle is on Monday of each week, we're going to test a different lift. So week 1, we'll test a front squat. Week 2, we'll test a push press. Week 3, we'll test a power clean. Week 4, we'll test a snatch. Now, each other subsequent lifting day is going to be a bit different from week to week. 1, to set you up for success on the push press, the power clean, the snatch. And 2, to train varied lifts and movement patterns that we haven't touched as much on the previous cycles. Or to continue touching after we've maxed. So for this front squat, what we're going to take here is you're going to look at this back squat, and this is going to have carryover to that front squat when we're at max. So we'll have 4 weeks of progressing a back squat, a week back off, then we'll test a front squat when we're at max. Theoretically, if you're getting way stronger in your back squat, your front squat should go up. Assuming you're also spending time in the front rack, and we are doing that by doing clean complexes. Then you can look here. Day 2 on this first week, we're going to do a, push press complex. And that's going to have some carryover to make sure you're nice and touched up for that push press 1 rep max on week 2. Then here we'll have power cleans, waves, and that's going to have carryover to that week 3 power clean test. And then over here we'll have power snatch and a squat snatch complex, which will have carryover to tune up that squat snatch test on week 4. Now, what you'll also note is we've got some deadlift, some snatching, some power cleans. We've got some back squats, some gymnastic work, some deadlifts. We've got some front squats, some jerks. We've got some squat cleans, some deadlifts, some strict press, etc. So we're still squatting, still pulling from the floor, still doing all those things. We're starting to get a bit more varied on this cycle while having one day each week that's super heavy. And we like Mondays for that because you're coming fresh off a rest day. So we take a nice long warm up, get sweaty, and then you're gonna feel great on Monday going into that 1 rep. So this is like, 4 weeks on, 1 week off, 4 on, 1 off, 4 on, 1 off, 4 on, 1 off, all the way for these 7 cycles. What's also important to note, and what we do quite a bit differently than a lot of other programs, is these 4-week cycles are not just 5 by 5 for 4 weeks. They're way different. Some of them are like wildly varied from week to week. Others are more subtle variants. Like for example, on this complex cycle, this back squat is going to go 5 by 5, 5 by 4, 5 by 3, 5 by 2. Then you'll have a back off week, and then this day you'll do a front squat 1 rep max. So you've gone 5, 4, 3, 2, back off 1 rep. So we're doing things where there is a progression of strength. There is a structured progression for competitors and for athletes just looking to get fitter and stronger. But we are also implementing variance in movement variations, patterns, implements. So maybe one cycle we have a heavy squat day and each week the squat pattern is different. Or for example here we have a lunge day, but each week that lunge variation is going to be different, a back rack, a front rack, an overhead. Or complexes, this snatch complex is going to be different each week. This clean complex is going to be different each week. There are going to be pauses 1 week, no pauses the next week. So we have a lot of variance within the structure of a cycle, but there's still progression. So that's, I think, the important thing to note is when you're looking at this, there's still a crap load of variance, and we're still relying a lot on transfer of skill from different movements. Once we finish this 7th week, we'll have one final back off week, and then we'll enter open prep, which is 10 to 12 weeks. I can't remember off the top of my head what the exact number of weeks is before the first open workout, but it'll essentially be 10 to 12 weeks of different strength pieces each week. So we've taken a relative structure here with a lot of variance within it. We're ditching all the structure, and it's going to be something different each week that looks a lot more like the way you would lift and test lifting in competition, in the open, in quarterfinals and semifinals, the games. And the reason we do that is because we've taken all of this time to build up a foundation, a solid foundation of strength, to go from building up your joints and tendons and ligaments, etc., to getting heavier and heavier, to complexes, to testing. Now we're going to put this foundation to use during the open prep phase, and then by the time the open comes around, you're ready to shit up. And that's the theory, the goal. So we have all of these are already written out. What we're going to do in our next video is we're going to write out each week of clean and jerk waves, each week of weighted pull-up, weighted dip on cycle 5 and cycle 6 and cycle 7. And you guys will get to watch that process.